Well, it was just moments ago that Hillary Clinton wrapped up her first of two stops in Charleston, and she talked about poverty, but also about body cameras for police officers, as well as the indictment of a South Carolina police officer after the fatal shooting of a black man.
I think the terrible, tragedy in Charleston, which led to the indictment, was, a result of seeing the facts, of having information.
So Susan Page is the Washington bureau chief for USA Today and joins me here in D.C., or I joined Susan here in D.C., which is great just to be here in person with you. But it's really fascinating to see the machinations and the little twists from the campaign trail. And we'll talk about machinations with Trump here in a moment. But there's good news and bad news for Clinton in swing state polls from Quinnipiac University. First, the bad news. We look at Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, where she's down double digits about whether or not voters trust her or not. So how can you be a successful candidate if voters don't really trust you, Susan?
Well, she does have some strength in these polls about it being a fighter and a fighter with your interest at heart. But yeah, this is a big problem for Hillary Clinton, and it's something that's happened relatively recently. She's taken a lot of hits in terms of her use of those private email server when she was Secretary of State. The contributions to the Clinton Foundation, I think, have had an effect. So she is going to be in the process, I think, over the next couple months of trying to rebuild that sense that she's someone you can trust.
All right, so if we look at some better news for Hillary Clinton, many of the major GOP candidates in the swing states we talked about, Rubio comes the closest to her. He's even slightly ahead in Pennsylvania. Bush, meanwhile, isn't far behind. So if Clinton is doing poorly on the trust factor, right, and these other people are doing better, why hasn't the GOP been able to land a real knockout punch? Well,
it's still early, and remember, we now have 12 candidates and counting on the Republican side. Jeb Bush just this week announced his campaign officially. So I think it's early to be drawing very many conclusions. At this point in previous election cycles, the person who wins the election sometimes is not really doing very well at this point. This is a process we're going to have over months and months, and a chance for voters to take a look at these contenders and see if there's someone they could envision as their leader.
To vet and get to know you.
Yeah, that's why we have an election.
Speaking of which, Joe Scarborough interviewed Donald Trump, who we all think we know because we've known him for so many years. He's officially in the race now after his announcement yesterday. But this is just a preview of what's to come on Morning Joe tomorrow. Take a look.
I think that Bush is a nice man. I call him, he's a man that doesn't want to be doing what he's doing. I call him the reluctant warrior, and warrior is probably not a good word. But I think Bush is an unhappy person. I don't think he has any energy, and I don't see how he can win. In addition to that, he's in favor of Common Core, and he's weak on immigration.
Favor of Common Core, weak on immigration. He wasn't holding back on Jeb Bush, which he feels is probably the person he wants to top tier himself against. But Donald Trump is not afraid to go for it and say it.
Man, yeah, and this is, to be clear, Donald Trump will not be the Republican nominee for president. Donald Trump will not be the next president of the United States. But Donald Trump could have an impact on this race that he joined yesterday. He could have an impact by making these charges, by putting people like Jeb Bush, who is a credible nominee, on the spot, by forcing him to respond to some of these. And I'd say Donald Trump can be pretty outrageous. He does seem to be having a good time, and that is something I think is attractive in a candidate.
Well, it does seem that he's having a good time. And I think that, from experiences that you have with Donald Trump, whether you see him on TV or you have a personal interaction with him, sometimes they don't match up so well, because he'll throw some fire bombs, and then when you see him in person, he's very charming. So it'll be interesting to see how they all interact together if they do get on that Fox debate stage first, if he makes the cut.
Right, and at the moment he would, by the standard. I mean, we have a little time before the first debate in August, so we'll see if he does. He'll make that debate different. That debate will be different with a Donald Trump on the stage than it would be without one. For one thing, some other candidate who might have gotten on won't be if Trump is.
And he'll be taking up a lot of oxygen, no matter what. But Donald Trump is in it. Susan, thanks so much.